Hello everybody. Oop, I'm dropping things on my keyboard. Sorry about that. I'm just going to make an adjustment to my camera because for some reason the lighting that was okay on Monday is now not okay. That's the way life is, I suppose. Right. So you just keep yourselves occupied for a few minutes while I adjust this and see if we can improve it. Oh dear. Ooh, no, not that. That's kind of better for not the sparkly bits, but for the light levels at least. And now we need to do this bit, which is, it's a fine line between fading into grey. Terrible. That's a little better. Can we work with that? Are we okay with having weird sparkly bits around the edge of my hair because I don't have a hair light? Yes, a light that shines on my hair. I don't have one, which is why you get to see the weird bits because I have to try and trim out too much of the green. And I can make myself very, very, very grey. Not just my hair either. Okay, that looks like that's going to be it. I have no idea why my phone is now asking me to make a call because I didn't tell it to do that sort of thing. It's never been allowed to do that sort of thing all by itself before, but for some reason it's saying, hello, do you want to make a call? Because it's been listening to me. Does your phone do that? Does it suddenly decide, oh, you want to make a call to somebody, here you go, tell me who you want to call? And you're like, I didn't tell you to call anybody, why are you doing that? I don't know, it's freaky. This technology, there's meant to be subtitles that work on this. I can't see them doing anything. I can see a button on my screen if I hover over it on my other browser, on my browser, but it doesn't do anything. This thing is not actually listening. The computer is not listening to me and then showing me, or you, my words. But my phone is. How peculiar. Anyway, I think we've got the picture, so it's reasonable. I was actually going to change the background for you so you had a different library. But just too many things happening, and I was meant to be doing some work stuff, putting some photos online for our products today. And anyone who's been working on Shopify today may have had trouble with it recognizing you as an admin to let you do things like that. I was one of those people. So that took me a little while, gave me a few panicky moments where I was thinking like, oh no, I've been locked out of our account. Hope not. And it turns out, no, actually they had it down in part of their system for some people. I don't know why, it just did. Okay, we're going to have to put up with that looking a little bit washed out or grey or green around the edges or whatever it is it's doing. And I'm going to get on with what we're here for, which is reading a book. So there you go. This is the book we're reading today. It's called A Regular Handful, subtitled Or Ruthie's Charge. That's because Ruthie has to look after the others. And it's by a lady called Jennie Chappell. And there is one page missing. Well, it's actually 2 pages, one sheet missing. I don't know if it'll actually affect us today. We can still get the main impact of what happens in the story anyway. It would be nice to have it, but we haven't. This is an old book. It was given to my grandfather in 1920 for learning Psalm 98. There you go. And so because it's that age and it was done as a gift for learning Psalm 98, it's therefore probably going to have some good moral points in the story. But it's actually a nice little story anyway. So, sorry. I think at one stage the Victorians and the Edwardians decided that rather than just having their nannies and nurses and parents and stuff, especially if you had enough money to have servants, teaching their children all about how to be a good person, they would also just encourage them by having a fun story to read, but also have some some relatively good morals points in them, and this is one of them. The story is not too church style preachy. It's got a few points like that in it, but it's also quite a fun little story, so we'll get on with it. I do know that my dad has enjoyed this one a lot when he's reread it. I'm just moving some things so I can prop the book up. I should really have a proper book prop, shouldn't I? No, that's not going to work because it's just going to slide off. Okay, ignore that. I'll just hold the book and I'll wave it at you when it's time to show you a picture, because there aren't any other ways of doing it at the moment. A regular handful. Oh dear. I forgot to change the information on the overlay up there for you, didn't I? Oh well, we'll do that before next time, because it won't be a one-session read. A Regular Handful, or Ruthie's Charge, by Jennie Chappell. And if you can hear hammering in the background, it's because they're trying to do some repairs to some part of our house downstairs. So there you go. And I shall take the bookmark out and not wave it at you. A Regular Handful, Chapter 1, Great Preparations. Now then, Les, now is our time. Mother had gone down in the kitchen to shred the candied peel for the cake and wash the currants. She won't be back for 10 minutes. Stop, where are you going? To see Mother shred the peel? No, you can't, not just now. We really must get those things done up while she's out of the way. She will be sure to save us some bits of the sugar. Candied peel was something that you bought not usually in a pre-made packet. It was peel from, say, oranges or lemons or something like that had been left to soak in a sugar syrup, and then often would also have kind of an extra coating of sugar crystals over the outside. So you could get little lumps of peel flavoured sugar that would come off in the wrap of the quantity of peel that you'd bought from the grocer. They would wrap it up in some paper or put it in a little paper bag. And so that's what Leslie was hoping to get some of from Mother. But you can't just now. We really must get those things done up while she's out of the way. She'll be sure to save us some bits of the sugar, which is why I was explaining it. Go and fetch your vases. Better bring them down one by one in case you break them. Bobbie, ducky, you remember where you put the sweeties, don't you? Just inside my second drawer. At number 4, Laurel Villas, the air for some days past had been full of mystery. 12-year-old Ruth had sat evening after evening behind an extraordinary barricade formed of a desk, a workbox, and 4 or 5 books. But Mother, who was the soul of honour, never once tried to peep over it. Ruth's brown head was bending always over some piece of work that lent a rosy reflection to her rather pale little face. Brown head because of the colour of her hair. But although snippets of ruby-coloured plush and coral pink sateen were all over the place, Mother never asked what they were or how they came there. Now, plush is kind of like velvet. It's got that sort of all the fibres standing up on end texture. And sateen is like satin, but it's made from a different thread type, I think. But it's got a more smooth, shiny surface. Coral pink sateen were all over the place. Mother never asked what they were or how they came there, and she even went up 2 flights of stairs to fetch a card of buttons from her reserve stock, rather than meddle with the workbox that hid what Ruth was doing. Now, I probably should next time show you my workbox, what they're referring to as a workbox. I call it my sewing box. It's where you put your needles and threads and your scissors and your buttons. And when you bought buttons, you didn't buy them loose and ask for a certain number unless you were actually going to the shop that sold them that way. You would often buy a card of buttons, and so it would be a piece of cardboard, and stitched onto it by hand were a set of buttons in a number of, there were common numbers of buttons you would get on cards. And so you'd go to the shop, you'd have a look at their buttons and find the sort of buttons that you wanted and ask for a card of those or a couple of cards of those. And I'll be able to show you that too, because I've got some of those in my box. But I will need to try and remember to show you, so please remind me. If you're in our Discord server, write a reminder in the chat part of the Discord server, and then hopefully I will remember to do it. Yes, I've got a lot of very old-fashioned stuff in my house, but that's because I grew up in my family. But next door to us were my grandparents, and just up the road from us were my other grandparents, and we used to spend a lot of time with them. So hence me reading old-fashioned books, me enjoying them, but also having a lot of old-fashioned things about the place. They're just normal for us. We keep using them. We shall carry on when I find it, rather than meddle with the workbox that hid what Ruth was doing. At that time, a week or so before her own birthday in fact, Mrs. Morell was wisely a trifle blind and deaf, for bedroom doors acquired a habit of very gently and slowly closing, as if of their own accord, when her footsteps sounded upon the stairs. There was a great deal of whispering in passages and corners, and frequently, when she went back to the sitting room after a few minutes' absence, a tremendous rustling of paper would suddenly cease, and Ruth and Leslie be found doing nothing in particular, which looked with looks of profound importance. And well they might, for what had not they, with Hannah the servant, between them, had not they, with Hannah the servant, between them, got the weighty business on hand of spending 2 and 11 halfpenny on 3 separate birthday presents for mother, not to speak of 2pence which Bobbie, their 5-year-old paying guest, insisted on contributing of his own private funds. Now I'm just finding this to remind myself, 12 years old. Ruth is 12. And just remember that children in those days were considered a lot more innocent than they are in this day and age, if you were not of the working class. Carrying on. Bobbie insisted on contributing out of his own private funds. So a paying guest, they kind of explain later on, it's kind of that he was a boarder with them, but he's very young. I think he's a preschooler of some sort, maybe even a toddler. Leslie was rather for declining Bobbie's share in the matter. He's not any relation of ours, he said jealously. He's only here like a sort of lodger. What does he want to join in for? I think it's very sweet of him, dear little man, said Ruth. Hannah isn't any relation either, but you thought it nice of her to buy that wall tidy. But Hannah is just like one of us. She's been with us ever since we were babies, and before. Why, she remembers father going away. She was telling me yesterday how she went with mother to see him off and carried you, and how all the people cheered when the ship started, because it was such a splendid, adventurous voyage he was going on. Hannah is one of us. But this kid, he's all right, but we had never heard of him 3 months ago, and I don't see that he wants to be giving presents to our mother. Oh, Les, it is queer of you to talk like that, said Ruth. Poor Bobbie hasn't any mother of his own, and that's just why he is here. Think of what it must be never to have a mother of one's own to make birthdays for. And don't you know how mother said that when he came to live with us, it was a responsibility. We had to try and make this a real home for him, so that he should never miss any love or anything. And it was all his own idea to give mother something. I think she'll be ever so pleased. So there were 4 presents, and 4 birthday cards to be done up and addressed to mother tonight, all ready to be taken into her room first thing tomorrow morning. A cardboard wall tidy from Hannah, a red plush knitting bag made by Ruth, a pair of vases for her bedroom mantelpiece, chosen all his own self, from 9-year-old Leslie, there you go, he's 9, and a packet of caramels tied up with pink ribbon from Bobbie Wentworth. Oh, Leslie, they are blue, aren't they? Very blue, I mean, said Ruth with almost a gasp, as her brother proudly set his pair of vases on the mantelpiece for display. They are just the colour of the butcher boy's coat. Why didn't you get those creamy-coloured ones we were looking at yesterday? Don't you think mother will like them? Asked Leslie, the triumphant air of a moment before suddenly collapsing. I gave 2pence more for these because they've got daisies on them, and mother is so fond of daisies. Those yellowy ones had only browny sort of leaves and things on them. Oh, I shall be sorry if mother thinks they're ugly. The splotches of white and yellow, staring out from a crude blue background, were indeed anything but artistic. And Ruth was old enough to know it, but she also knew how dear to their mother would be her boy's thought to please her. "Oh, I'm sure she won't think them ugly, dear," she said. "She'll just love you having thought of the daisies, I know. They're very nice, Leslie, so nice, and tall, I mean," she added hastily, torn between the exact truthfulness, which was her habit, and a shrinking from hurting anyone's feelings. "I expect Mother will find them very useful to put her hat pins in. Now then, Bobbie, go and get yours, and you shall write on this pretty card. I'll guide your hand. With Bobbie's love." "I got 'em here," said the sturdy Bobbie, pausing in the business of bus driving on the end of the sofa and pulling up his holland smock to make a mighty dive into his knickers pocket. "What, there?" exclaimed Ruth in dismay. "But you put them in my drawer this morning. I thought I'd better mind them myself, perhaps," he replied, growing purple in the face with his efforts to produce the precious packet. "Here it is." "But, oh, Bobbie," cried Ruth, "this won't do. It's all soft and sticky, and you've been and opened them. You promised me you wouldn't." "I just wanted to see if they was all right, that's all," said Bobbie. "I think I'll go and see if that cake is done yet." "No, but Bobbie, wait a minute." And Ruth grabbed the youngster as he made to escape from her two searching inquiries. "You've been tasting them, I do believe." "I never," said Bobbie indignantly. "I only just licked one of 'em, ever so little, to see if they was good. The pink ones is best," he added thoughtfully, which means he's tasted more than one. "Oh, Bobbie," said Ruth, trying to look both shocked and sad at this awful confession. Leslie was rolling on the floor in fits of laughter. "I thought I could trust you, and now you haven't anything for Mother's birthday at all. You can't give her these." Bobbie's nose grew red and his chin wrinkled and his big blue eyes overflowed with tears and his mouth opened to emit a wail. Leslie promptly jumped up from the floor and clapped a hand over the cavern. "Shut up, kiddie," he exclaimed, though not unkindly. "We'll get something else. That'll be all right. If you start yelling now, Mother'll come up and see everything." "But there's no time," said Ruth. "We can't go out. We shall be having tea directly, and Bobbie hasn't any more money either. It's too late now." At this knell of hope, Bobbie flung himself free from Leslie's restraining hand and cast himself into Ruth's arms with a cry of despair. She soothed him in a motherly fashion, though she could not refrain from improving the occasion by reminding him that he had promised her not to touch the sweeties and that he had broken his word, and that in consequence— But Leslie, who knew from experience that a little help is worth a great deal of lecturing, broke in with, "Look here, old chap, I've got a penny left. I'll buy those old sweets off you, and then you can get something else with the penny. I'll tell you what, I heard Mother say to Hannah the other day that she must have a new nutmeg grater. They're those shiny tin things with lots of pinholes in them." "Nutmeg grater, dear," Ruth corrected gently as she wiped Bobbie's tears. "Well, don't you think a nut emigrator would be a fine thing for Bobbie to give Mother? And I've seen fine ones, bright as silver, at Smith's, a penny each. I'll go and get one. Shall I, Bob? And you can give me half those sweeties, not the sucked ones, though. Ruth'll share 'em out. Eh, old chap?" Bobbie nodded. "Here comes Mother. Stow those vases, Ruth. I'll fly and get that thing now, and I'll be back in a jiff." A minute later, the bang of the front door told that he was gone. "Where is Leslie?" "Did I hear him go out a little while ago?" asked Mrs. Morell, while tea was being got ready. So this is a little bit later on. A grown-up person could have gone to Smith's and back easily in a quarter of an hour, yet thrice that time had passed, and Leslie had not returned. "Yes, Mother dear," said Ruth, who was making toast. "He just ran out for something. He'll be back directly." "I know, don't I?" said Bobbie, "but I'm not going to tell. Mummy doesn't know, does she?" The little fellow had picked up the Sinclair children's favourite name for their mother, and no one objected. Mummy popped a lump of candied sugar into Bobbie's mouth. "We'd better cork you up," she said, laughing, "or secrets will leak out." So she's helping the children to keep the secrets about her birthday. "We know, don't we, Ruth?" persisted the irrepressible Bobbie in a loud whisper, with his teeth crunching the sugar. "It's a Hush," said Ruth. "Mother will hear you." But Mother had gone down to the kitchen again. "I feel so strange this afternoon, Hannah," she said, sitting down beside the fire. Mrs. Morell was a small, slight woman, very young and girlish looking to be the mother of Ruth, who would soon be the taller of the two. She had sweet brown eyes and a delicate flush on her cheeks, but the strain and struggle of the 9 long years in which she had faced the world with her children, lacking the support of a husband's strength and love, had left sad traces upon her thin, worn face. There was a quiver in her voice as she went on. "I know the dears are getting ready for some little surprise for me tomorrow. It is so sweet of them. They are always so loving and good. There never were such good children, though Leslie is a regular handful, bless him." There you go, a regular handful. That's our title. "And I ought to be so happy, but all today, Hannah, I've been feeling so dismal that I could hardly keep from crying." "You're overdone, ma'am, that's what it is," replied Hannah, pausing a moment in her occupation of beating up the birthday cake to gaze with affectionate sympathy at her mistress. So Hannah is mixing the cake mix. That's what she means by beating up. And she's probably doing it by using a wooden spoon in a big bowl. And so she's having to work hard at it. Cooks were often fairly not running fit, but what's the word? I can't think of the word. They could carry on for quite a long time doing something. They had that sort of stamina. That's the word. Had quite a lot of stamina just to be able to keep going at whatever it was that they're doing, because you didn't have an electric mixer in those days. You may not have even had one of those ones with the windy handle, which wouldn't have worked very well for fruitcake anyway. You'd actually be better off to use a wooden spoon. So it's hard work being a cook back in this day and age. But that's why she had to pause also while she was talking. And she's in the middle of making the cake. Obviously, that's why she's mixing. So she paused in a moment in her occupation of beating up the birthday cake to gaze with affectionate sympathy at her mistress. "See how you've been working lately, painting away at them pots and pans. I beg pardon, ma'am, plates and vases, early and late, as long as there's a moment's daylight, and then sitting up hour after hour when you ought to be abed, stitching at Miss Ruthie's new frock. It's killing you, ma'am, that's what it's doing." "I hope not, Hannah," sighed Mrs. Morell wearily, "for the darling's sakes. But I'm not only tired today, that's nothing, but I feel so horribly low-spirited, just as if something dreadful were going to happen." "You do believe in having presentiments, don't you, Hannah? That's like having a premonition, having presentiments." "If it was me, ma'am, as had got that kind of feeling, I should say there was something in it," replied Hannah, standing with her bare red arms akimbo. That means her arms, her hands on her hips, basically. And gazing at her mistress with an anxiety in her honest face that she tried hard to conceal. "'Cause I'm tough as an old boot and not given to nerves, but with you, it's just your health and overwork. If you'll excuse me saying it, ma'am, I've always thought, and I do still, that it was a great mistake your taking on the brother of a young child, the bother of a young child like Master Bobbie. The trifle you get by it isn't worth the extra worry." So they get paid for having him to stay with them. That's probably why they took him on. If her husband has disappeared, they won't have a big income to look after them. And so that's why she's also working. She obviously does work painting patterns on plates and vases. "I didn't do it for the sake of the money, Hannah," said Mrs. Morell. "It was because the poor mite seemed so in need of a mother. Perhaps my little ones may need a mother some day, and then, my dear," said Hannah sturdily, "if that day should ever come, which the good Lord grant it may be far off, there's one above as'll be father and mother both. Don't he never lose sight of that." "I'm afraid I do, Hannah. I often do. I'm ashamed of myself. I've so little faith. But I know I'm not well. Inside I'm all of a shake. Oh, I do wish Leslie would come back. He's been gone over an hour now, and Ruth says he only ran into the road for something. Where can he have got to? He knows it is past tea time. Listen," said Mrs. Morell, starting to her feet with an expression of terror. "There are wheels stopping at our gate. He's met with an accident. He's been brought home in a cab." The colour suddenly fled from Mrs. Morell's lips and cheeks, leaving them a dreadful bluish white, and but for Hannah's ready arm, she would have fallen to the ground. So she got quite faint. And I'm going to have a quick drink of water. I didn't do my usual intro, did I? I just nattered on about the trouble I was having on the computer and things like that. Sorry about that. Hi, I'm Jev. I read old-fashioned children's stories. like what we're already doing. And I have a suggestion, a tip. Make sure you have something to drink, something to snack on, and somewhere comfortable to sit. Unless, of course, you're working or studying, in which case you have to put up with the seat or standing position that you've got and just make the most of your ears being available to listen. Anyway, but thank you for being here. Additionally, I don't usually chat during a chapter, just between them. So if there's something that needs explaining that I'm reading about, I will do that. But if there's a lot of people busy in the chat box over there on the side of the window that I'm looking at, I don't know where yours is, I don't usually engage with that while I'm reading a chapter, unless I really, really have to. Or if somebody has looked something up for me and put the explanation in the chat box, then I will probably read it out to you. Most of the time, I actually manage to understand a lot of the weird words and situations that are talked about in the old books, just because of the sort of things that I grew up reading. They're quite normal to me. Not necessarily my own life experience, but a lot of experience reading those things. It's like if you grew up reading Shakespeare the way it was originally written, you have an understanding of the way those words sound and what they mean for us in today's day and age. Whereas a lot of other people, if they have never done that, it's just a whole bunch of really weird ways of putting things, and words don't look like what you expect them to look like. So yeah, for me, there's a lot of those things that I'm very familiar with that I just, if I think that the author is not going to explain something, I will explain it. Occasionally I'll get that mixed up and I'll explain something and then 2 sentences later the author will too. Not so much these days, but when I first was reading to you, that would happen. And then sometimes it's just like, I forget about it. Sorry. Anyway, we'll carry on. I've had another drink. We shall carry on. Actually, I just need to copy something from one of my other monitor, and then I shall carry on reading. Oops. That's the one I want. Yes, I've got another monitor next to me, which I will look across at from time to time, just because it's got information that I may need. Anyway, we shall carry on. We are reading. No, I'm not going to look up there and see where it is on my overlay, because I haven't put it there. That was naughty. A Regular Handful by Jennie Chappell. We are reading Chapter 2, Many Happy Returns. Well, but what made you so long, dear? And how was it you rode home? That's right, there were wheels on the road outside. The family were gathered round the tea table when Mrs. Morell asked these questions. She had recovered from her fainting fit, of which the children knew nothing. And Leslie, in a mud-bespattered collar, was cramming his mouth with toast. I went to Smith's for something that we wanted, he replied, and they hadn't got it. And then I went to Johnson's, and they hadn't either, and it was something we wanted most particularly and couldn't wait for, and I knew they'd be positively certain to have it at the stores in Station Parade, so I ran all the way there. All the way to Station Parade, exclaimed his mother. No wonder you were gone so long. I can't think how you got back as soon as you did. London British Naming Convention. Station Parade is probably a street with some shops in it. A parade of shops is often a phrase that's used in England. The Americans' nearest equivalent is probably a strip mall, which is where you have a whole lot of little shops in a cluster together, but in a row, actually, rather than a group. But usually those are built for it, specifically the location, whereas these ones are ones that have grown there after the area around has developed. And if it's Station Parade, it will be the little road that goes to the train station, I would guess. Right, carrying on, Station Parade. So that will be why there's a shop there. Because there'll be other shops there, because it's the parade of shops. No wonder you were gone so long. I can't think how you got back as soon as you did. I shouldn't, only I ran across old Tibbs Major on his bike, and he took me up behind him, and so we came spinning up the road like billy-o. Up the high road, among all the traffic? The two of you on one bicycle, and poor Mrs. Morell went white again with horror. Yes, you should have seen us, said Leslie with pride, because it was so much fun for him, obviously. Not necessarily something a mother is going to enjoy, and at the age that he is, he probably has no idea how much she has worries. Yeah, sorry, I'm just moving my chair so it's in a better place again. My child, I think I should have died with terror, said his mother. Leslie, I wish you would not do such foolhardy things. You keep me in a state of perpetual unease about you. Bobbie was staring at the hero with eyes like saucers, too full of admiration even to eat. Ruth, however, was looking troubled. Her conscientious little soul was feeling that somehow her brother's running of this risk was her fault for allowing him to go out for the nutmeg grater. Well, we did have one or two pretty close shaves, said Leslie, confessing calmly. And then for a lark, instead of bringing me straight home, Tibbs went all round Cedars Park and wouldn't stop. And just as we got to the top of Brankston Road, there was a most awful bang. I made sure we were both shot dead. Made sure in this context is I thought. I was certain. It was a very common usage to make sure something, meaning being certain of something, without actually meaning making it happen. It's one we've come across in several of the other books we've had before, so I'll carry on, sorry. I made sure we were both shot dead, but we'd only gone over a nail or something and done for one of the tyres. So then we had to walking the bike, and I don't know what time I should have been home, only Jones, our milkman, came along in his cart, and as he was coming past here, I got him to give me a ride. So it was just all right. Yes, but I'm afraid it will be all wrong one of these days if you're not more careful, Leslie, said his mother. You rush into everything so without a thought. By and by, when Ruth and Leslie were alone, the boy produced another parcel from under the sofa, where it had been hastily hidden. I've got the immigrator thing, and it's a fine one, he said, so I didn't have any trouble for nothing. But I say, what makes mother always so frightened? Other fellows' mothers are not, so far as I can see. No, perhaps not, but mother has had such a lot to try her nerves, answered Ruth. Think of all that dreadful time she was waiting for news of father. And before that, when she knew she couldn't possibly hear at all for months and months. Well, why couldn't she? Didn't anybody hear from anybody who went out on that voyage? No, nobody had any letters after the first few weeks. You see, when people go out with an Arctic expedition, like father did... lost the part on the page. Like father did, their friends know they are going to a place where there are no posts. Mail. Father sent mother a letter from the very last place they stopped at, where there was a post office. She's got it now, I've seen it. And after that she never heard of him again. That was 9 years and a half ago, 3 months before you were born. Why weren't there any more post offices where they went? Asked Leslie after a pause. Because to him there's a post office in every town, every village, every house, the centre of areas where they've got houses, little suburbs. Because there are no people to want to send letters, I suppose, and if there are, the postman could never go about it because it's all ice and snow for miles and miles and miles, and there are no roads or railways or anything, and 6 months in the year it's pitch dark, you know, or it would be if it wasn't for the moon and stars and those wonderful lights, the aurora borealis, they're called, so that's the northern lights. That means they're a long way north. I say, what a place to go, exclaimed Leslie, staring into the fire. I expect father took after me and liked doing adventurous things. Yes, but he had to. In a way, it was his profession. You go and do all sorts of dangerous things that you needn't, said Ruth, who felt a great deal more than 3 years older than her brother, and was rather fond of bringing in a moral whenever she saw a chance. And people like that nearly always come to a dreadful end. The birthday presents were all duly packed up and hidden away in the cupboard in Ruth's little room without discovery, and the boys, advised by Ruth, agreed to go to bed rather earlier than usual, so that all might wake up in good time in the morning, before mother had a chance to come in and call them. It was a time-honoured custom at No. 4 Laurel Villas to greet the one whose birthday was to be celebrated by the singing of the old favourite song, Many Happy Returns of the Day. outside his or her bedroom door as early as possible, but they had need to sleep with one eye open to be beforehand with Mother. Now, this is, I think, before the days of singing Happy Birthday to You, which is actually still within copyright. You can sing it, I can sing it, any of us can sing that for birthdays. They don't chase the copyright for that usage, but like in movies and stuff like that, apparently they have to pay copyright fees for using it because it's still within copyright. Whereas what they're talking about is Many Happy Returns of the Day, which sounds like it was an existing song. A lot of the time people, when they're writing these sort of books, actually refer to real things. So I would say, from the way it's referred to further on through this book as well, that it was a real song that was sung on people's birthdays. And you can look that up and either put the information in the chat, or you can join our Discord server and put that in the information in the chat over there. So there you go. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you can even comment underneath the video that you're currently watching and put the information that you've found about it. And if you aren't able to actually post a link, you can put enough information to be able to find it if we do a Google search. So there you go. While you're listening, you can be typing and finding out and sharing that with us. It's quite fun finding out some of these things. You may even find a YouTube video that has it. The song, Many Happy Returns of the Day. I don't know, but it'll be fairly old anyway. But it took quite a bit to be able to be beforehand with Mother. In other words, to be able to get up ahead of her. Perhaps it was because she had this on her mind, that Ruth was rather restless and had a strange dream. She thought she saw a beautiful angel bending over her with a dazzling light all round and Mother's face. Ruth's dream angels always had Mother's face because even in her sleep, her imagination could never picture anything more lovely and dear. And the angel stooped and kissed her and murmured, "Goodbye," and Ruth put up her arms to clasp the angel and hold her fast, but they touched only empty air, and waking, as it seemed, with the shock of disappointment, she found that the radiance of the angel was only the sun shining upon her bedroom wall with an unusual brightness, because she had purposely left the blind undrawn, so the sun would come in and wake her. And just then the clock struck 6. So I'm going to take a guess and say it was summer or late spring for it to be sunny at that time of morning. Ruth jumped up and put on some of her clothes. Then she carried the parcels into the boys' room and woke them. Leslie was at first inclined to resent this little disturbance and told her, "Go away." But when she backed up her persuasions by pulling off the bedclothes, that's the sheets and blankets, and sitting upon them, so he couldn't get to them, he rather unwillingly arose. Bobbie, however, had to be left where he was, for every effort to drag him out of his favourite position, that of crouching upon all fours with his face buried in the pillow, only resulted in a fretful whimper and a more determined burrowing. But he couldn't sing much and didn't know many happy returns, so his absence was of no great consequence. Ruth made Leslie put on his dressing gown over his pyjamas and carry a vase in each arm. "Now, begin when I do," she whispered as they stationed themselves on the mat outside Mrs. Morell's door. "And don't roar out too loud and don't say yappy returns." Very sweet the two young voices sounded as they joined in the old familiar strains dear to their mother in her own happy childhood's home of long ago. Merry words, ye come speeding along, telling all that affection can say. 'Tis the music of heart chords that breathes in the song, many happy returns of the day. If you typed that into a lyrics search, you might find the song. I'll read them again for you so you can write them down. Quick. Merry words, ye come speeding along, telling all that affection can say. 'Tis the music of heart chords that breathes in the song, many happy returns of the day. They sang one verse quite through, and then paused to listen for an answering movement from within, but except for the chirp of the sparrows outside the landing window, all was still. "She's keeping quiet for us to go right through with it," said Ruth. "Let's sing the next verse." They quite expected that before reaching the end, the door, as often before, would be flung open and the little carolers gathered into Mother's arms, but again they ceased, and again they listened. All was still. "How sound asleep Mother is," said Leslie. "Let's go in and wake her," said Leslie. No, let's knock first. Perhaps she's so sleepy she thinks it's somebody singing out in the street. Rap, rap. Mother dearie, you awake? Mother, we've come to say many happy returns of the day. We shall have to go right in to her, said Ruth at last. I expect she sat up late last night and got very tired. She turned the handle of the door softly, she hardly knew why, and peeped inside. Leslie, however, pushed past her with his double armful and went in. Mother, he began, then suddenly stopped, with the half-framed word upon his tongue. Why, what? And the two children gazed into one another's startled eyes in blank bewilderment and dismay. No mother was there. She's got up early and gone downstairs, said Leslie, and he made to rush headlong in search of her. But Ruth held him by the sleeve. Mother has never been to bed at all, she said. Look how smooth everything is. The blind hasn't been pulled down and the washstand things haven't been touched. Oh, Leslie, what can be the matter? Mother often sits up dreadfully late, I know, when she wants to finish her work, but I never before knew her not to come to bed at all. Where can she be? Leslie, glancing into his sister's face, saw that her cheeks were deadly white and her eyes full of fear. And that's the end of that chapter. And I'm going to take a pause and see if I can do a quick adjustment to this overlay. We'll see, shall we? And it gives you a chance to quickly dash off to the loo and get yourself something to drink. And just in case you were wondering why I've been sitting here for so long looking at my monitor, the stream timed out and froze basically, and I could see that on my other monitor, and so I was just waiting. So I didn't say anything that you would miss out on. Okay, there you go. You didn't miss out on anything. I shall move this over here. Shut that. Open this. Oh, come on, don't do that to me. Yes, there it is. Open this. I'm getting there, I think. Ah, I better have a drink of water too. I am feeling it in my throat at the moment. So how is it where you are? Is it summer or is it winter? Is it too hot or is it too cold? Or are you somewhere in between where it's not too hot and not too cold? I'm in New Zealand, the northern part of New Zealand, and at the moment it's rather warm. Well, for us. It's not as warm as being in the tropics. It's not as warm as being in the desert. It's not as warm as being in most of Australia. But for us, in this part of New Zealand, it's warmer than we're normally used to, and it's warmer than we're normally comfortable with. And actually, I shall see if I can see what the temperature current, 27 degrees. It was 28 earlier on, or it's going to be 28. In New Zealand, that's pretty hot. It's fairly humid too, so, it feels like we want it to hurry up and rain because that would help to drop the temperature, but it hasn't, so we just have to put up with it. We're still a bit greener than most of Australia is, though. Green as in not dry. The grass hasn't gone quite so brown because New Zealand is just that little bit wetter than Australia is. Lots wetter. Our climate is much more like Tasmania, which is right down the very bottom of Australia. The rainfall and all that sort of stuff is more similar to that. But when it gets hot, because of our humidity, because New Zealand is completely surrounded by sea, and as a landmass it's quite narrow, so the sea is quite close to wherever you are, relatively speaking. And it does mean that it can get a little bit uncomfortable when it's hot. If it's humid, it's like, it feels so much hotter. I really do want to get this changed for you, but this is taking way too long. Anyway, I'll ignore that and carry on reading. There you go. Just as well. Right, we are reading, sorry, I'm still used to looking at my screen, A Regular Handful by Jennie Chappell. Its subtitle is Ruthie's Charge. Mother seems to think that Leslie, that's the boy, is a regular handful, which means he gets into not necessarily trouble, but he does things that she really rather wishes that he didn't. Things where there is potential for getting in trouble. Just waiting for my overlays screen to come up. It's taking its time. Anyway. And the other thing is taking its time as well. Right, we shall carry on reading. Chapter 3 of A Regular Handful, Cake and Consequences. Oh my goodness. Children, go back to bed this minute. You'll catch your deaths of cold. Thus, the homely, matter-of-fact tones of Hannah broke in upon the half-defined terror of that moment. Yeah, that would be really freaky. As a kid, you get up expecting it to be a special day, not just a normal day, because it's Mum's birthday, and you're taking her birthday presents, and you're going to sing happy birthday to her. And not only is she not there, it looks like she's not been there. And as a 10-year-old, 12-year-old, and a 9-year-old, that is really freaky, especially when you've just woken up, relatively speaking. Half-divine terror of that moment, her broad red face set in a frame of hair curlers, peered out of her own bedroom door with reassuring cheerfulness, and the children flew to her. "Oh, Hannah, where's Mother? She's never been to bed last night. What can be the matter?" "I shan't tell you a word until you're in bed again," Hannah made answer. "Just look at you, Miss Ruthie, with your bare feet all on the cold linoleum." That's why there was a mat outside Mother's door, because they have lino on the floors. Linoleum. Nearly there. Sorry, just trying to get this to go to the right place. No, give it to me, thank you. I have a slow old computer, which is why I read and don't play games on it. Well, for streaming. I can play games when I'm not streaming, but it just doesn't cope with any more than that. Right. Carrying on. Cold linoleum. A nice one to leave in charge of your brother, you are. Left in charge? She drove them before her as a benevolent sheepdog might 2 stray lambs, and actually tucked Leslie up in bed as though it were night instead of morning. For once, a long time ago, he had had croup, which is something that little kids need to stay in bed quite a bit for, because their bodies get very stressed by it. Croup usually involves phlegm in the chest and lots of coughing or something like that. I can't remember. Not a particularly pleasant thing to have happening. Anyway, so carrying on. Yeah, sorry, I'm just trying to look at this one over here. Yeah, I better not change that. I've just realised it would blink the screen out for you too long. She drove. Once, a long time ago, he had had croup, so she had been tucking him to bed some of the time, looking after him some of the time. Ruth sat outside on the eiderdown, outside of her bed, on the eiderdown, with her toes curled up under her petticoat. Do you know what an eiderdown is? An eiderdown is what we would now call a duvet, or if you're an Australian, a doona, or a quilt even. It's stuffed with feathers. Eider down, the down feathers of the eider duck, because they are known to be very, very fluffy, and it's the air space that they provide that helps an eiderdown or a feather duvet to be so warm. Very natural system and it's a good way to use up feathers, because feathers have been plucked from the birds when they've been prepared for food, because you don't eat the feathers, yuck. but they don't go to waste because they're being used. And so that's what an eiderdown is. It's an old English name for a feather-stuffed duvet, except that it doesn't hang down off the sides of your bed. It just sits on top of the bed, usually. Anyway, too much information. Sitting on top of the eiderdown, with her toes curled up under her petticoat. "But do say where Mother is, Hannah," they begged. "Has she gone for a walk before breakfast? Your mother is in Edinburgh by this time, I hope, or the best part of the way there," Hannah told them. "At Grandma's in Edinburgh?" they cried in amazement. "But she was here when we went to bed. Hannah, you're having a game with us." "Wish I was," answered the good soul with unmistakable sincerity. "She's got enough to burden her, poor dear, without a fresh trouble coming. After you children was abed, a letter came by the last post to say your grandma was dangerously ill, and could your ma go to her as soon as possible. I tried to get her to wait till morning, but no, she wouldn't listen to a word of it. There's a train goes north somewhere about midnight, so I had to pack her hold all there and then and run for a cab and let her get off to catch it." Yeah, that's it. Sorry. At that time period in England, in London especially, the post was delivered several times a day, especially if you paid extra for it to be delivered. There were some extra deliveries that they did standard, but then there were other ones that you could pay for, and it depended on how close to main post offices you were and other business spaces as well for some of those services. Here in New Zealand, we're now on every second day we get mail deliveries because most people aren't sending letters anymore. They send email. So unless it's a parcel, which comes by the courier, most of the time, most of us don't get letters anymore. So it's every second day instead of lots of times in one day, which is why she got a letter late at night, because it was on the last post. Finding it. "I made her have a glass of milk, though, with a egg beat up in it before she started." So it's like eggnog. "Which I've been thankful for ever since, and just a sandwich or two with meat extract between, thin bread and butter in her little bag." Meat extract. Not sure if that's like the equivalent of pate, but meat paste, or if that's, yeah, that would be what it is, meat paste. Just one of those things, a little bit like pate. "She was dreadful cut up to leave you children, but she was fair tore between the two, I could see, for if ever there was a good daughter to her mother, it's your dear ma, and her great fear was that she mightn't get there in time to see your poor grandma alive." "When's she coming back?" asked Leslie. "That's more'n I can say," Hannah answered. "Not as long as she's wanted there, you may be sure." "Hannah, I believe Mother did come in and say goodbye to me," said Ruth thoughtfully. "She came in to look at you all and kissed you," said Hannah. "But you didn't know it, for you were fast asleep." "But I did know it, Hannah. I felt it," said Ruth. "I should never be too asleep to feel Mother, not even if I were dead, I think. But it seemed only just a minute before I awoke this morning. Wasn't that funny?" So her dream was actually her mother coming in to kiss her goodbye. "We can't have the birthday now till Mother comes home again, can we?" said Leslie, "unless we send her the presents by post." "Oh, no, we'll wait," said Ruth. "We can't enjoy it a bit without Mother, and with poor Grandma so ill and all." "It'd be a shame to let that cake get stale, though," said Leslie as he pulled on his stockings. Remember, we've had stockings before. That's their equivalent of socks. "It's a stunner. I saw it when it came out of the oven last night. Did you put the icing on it, Hannah, and the pink happy returns?" "The icing's on, but I left the letters for your ma to do." "That's all right," said Ruth. "Perhaps Mother will be back in a few days, and then it will be a real happy return, won't it, for all of us?" "Your ma said you were to do everything just the same as if she was here," said Hannah. "She told me to tell you her heart would be here with you, and you are to be sure and enjoy yourselves and be very happy." "That means cut the cake," said Leslie with decision, but Ruth had to swallow a lump in her throat before she could reply steadily. "We won't cut the cake for a few days at least. How can Mother write the happy returns on it if it has been cut?" "We'd better do as we're told, I think," observed Leslie. "Mother said we were to do everything just the same as if she were here, and we ought to be obedient." Sounds like Leslie wants some cake already. And he drew himself up as he fastened his braces, with such an heroic air of being determined to do everything, even to entirely demolish, if need be, the birthday cake, rather than fail to fulfil Mother's wishes, that Ruth, with a queer little smile, gave up the argument. She carried her point at tea time, however, having Hannah on her side. The cake was brought out and placed in the middle of the table as an ornament, but its smooth white top remained unbroken. "I'll tell you what we'll do," said Ruth. "When Mother comes home, if you boys are good, what we'll do when Mother comes home. If you boys are good and don't worry, we'll have little candles all round it. I'll buy them, like Dora Robinson did. Won't that be lovely?" Candles on birthday cakes weren't a very particularly common thing at that stage. So it's just one of those things. Things change. They were probably reasonably expensive compared with what they are now. Now they're really easy to get, and if you want them even cheaper, you go to Gold Coin Shop or Dollar Store or something like that. "Wouldn't that be lovely? Good for you, Ruth. You're a wunner," cried Leslie with much approval. "And we shall have ever such a lot, 'cause Mother's ever so old. Dora only had 10, one for each year. We'll have a blaze." "Yes, there you go." "We shall have a good many, of course," said Ruth, "but Mother isn't old at all, Leslie. You mustn't say that." "How old?" demanded Leslie. "This," holding up his fingers to make the sign of 30. Sorry, I've got something going on over here, which is taking a little bit too many resources. I'll shut it. "This," holding up his fingers to make the sign of 30, "or this," he changed it to 50. "I know," said Ruth. "Hannah told me." "Well, you might tell us then," insisted Leslie. "I want to see how close together the candles will have to be." Sorry, this should have shut by now. "Perhaps we shall have to have 'em in twos, eh? How many will there be?" "Ain't he inquisitive?" remarked Bobbie. Ruth laughed. "Hannah told me," she said, "that Mother is the other side of 20. That means she's not yet 30, I think. Mrs. Morell had told Hannah that, if possible, she would write a letter home while travelling and post it as soon as ever she could after reaching her destination. This she must have done, for the letter came the second morning after she left. Short it was and shakily written because of the jolting of the train, but full of love and anxious care for the dear ones. "My Ruthie is such a little woman and always so thoughtful and good," wrote Mrs. Morell, "that I know that I can depend upon her looking after the younger ones and being a mother to them in my place. Hannah will have plenty to do in the house and will need as much help as possible. Leslie must be the man of the family and take care of them all and be a good example to Bobbie, who is sure to copy him." Sorry, I've got something tickling me. Piece of hair. "Each one must be very kind to all the others and all help one another be good. But if I have to be away long, Bobbie had better be taken to his own home." Then there was a postscript. "Arrived safely, dear," because she had been writing the other bit on the train. "Arrived safely. Dear Grandma is no worse than when they sent for me. The doctor thinks she may even be a shade better." And after that, a second postscript, really meant for Hannah only, but read aloud by mistake to them all. "I hope the cake turned out all right. I mixed the icing by that new recipe. You need not be afraid to let the children eat it, for it was made plain on purpose for them." Yes, because icing, traditional icing, has an underneath layer with a lot of almond essence and ground almonds in it, and it's to stop it's a fruit cake. If you put normal icing on top, which they used to use, royal icing was the version, it would get stained by natural colour coming through from the dried fruit that was in the cake, and so you have this layer of almond underneath it which stops that happening. But children often can't stand the flavour of that stuff. So Mother's found another recipe that she's given a try, and therefore it's one that the children will like because it doesn't have that under it. So there you go. Made plain on purpose for them. "There now, Mrs. Ruth," cried Leslie triumphantly. "You can't prevent us having some now. Hannah, fetch it in, will you? We'll sample it at once." "Not for breakfast," cried Ruth. "Who ever heard of a birthday cake for breakfast?" Well, we've got to make up for what we ought to have had yesterday. We're a day behindhand. I thought you wanted to keep it to light up when Mother comes home, said Ruth, who very much wanted to do so herself. Mother says we're to eat it, rejoined Leslie. Come on, Hannah. And Hannah, who was very indulgent, especially to boys, came on with the cake. Ruth was very sorry and disappointed to see the knife plunged into the smooth icing. Since the idea about the illumination had occurred to her, she had quite set her heart on it, and the vision of the cake preserved intact and set upon the table with its ring of tiny, star-like candles, as a surprise for Mother when she came home, had glowed more and more brightly in her mind, that vision. You are greedy, she said, to want to begin to gobble it all up directly. This is what happens when you've got a picture in your mind and something just derails it. You tend to get a little bit abrupt because you feel hurt because what you had planned for is not happening anymore. So she's speaking a little sharply with them. You're greedy, I think, retorted Leslie, to want to cuddle it up till it goes mouldy just for the sake of sticking a lot of silly candles round it. You said last night that you would like them, protested Ruth. That was before Mother wrote to say we were to eat it, the boy replied. I'd rather mind Mother than you. He had woken up with an aggravating fit upon him that morning, and it lasted all day, just to show Ruth that the cake was as much his as hers and that she had no power over it. He kept cutting himself a bit more and a bit more. He insisted on taking a big wedge of it to school for his lunch, and at tea time he ate nothing else. But in the evening his head ached so that he could not get on with his lessons. That's his homework. Ruth, he said suddenly as he yawned over a French grammar, Tompkins told me they've had the burglars in 2 doors away from them, and they took all the silver spoons and a lady's sealskin jacket and a purse full of money, and nobody knew a word about it till they went down in the morning and found the window open where they got out. How did they get in? Said Ruth. Tompkins says it must have been over the wall and in at the kitchen window. The back of the house is just like ours, and they've been to other places too. We haven't got any silver spoons or sealskin jackets, said Ruth. Mother says thieves never come unless they are pretty sure there's something worth stealing. In other words, they don't have a lot worth stealing in their house. But they might think there was, and there's all Mother's pictures and plaques and things, and they're worth hundreds of pounds. I know what I shall do anyhow. What? I shall take the poker and tongs to bed with me, and if I hear anybody in the night, I shall make such a row with them they'll think there's 20 men coming. You are silly, said Ruth. Well, we can't let them collar all Mother's good paintings, can we? We must do something, and Mother said I was to be the man of the family. We can't do any more than we always do, said Ruth. Hannah will lock up and bolt all the doors and fasten the windows. If you feel frightened at all, she added after a moment's thought, we might just put in something special in our prayers about being taken care of, and then we'll be sure to be safe. That actually has an effect. It does work. And I think a lot of the work that it does is because you've given away the worry. You've let it go out of your own hands. There you go. I'm not frightened, said Leslie with great scorn. If I heard a man coming up the stairs, I should just jump out of bed and call out very loudly, "Oh, Columbus, what's that?" The last "Oh, Columbus, what's that?" The last ejaculation, uttered in a terror-stricken whisper, was not at all the kind of conclusion Leslie intended, but he had been startled by a bumping noise overhead. Ruth sprang to her feet. "That's Bobbie," she said. "I'm afraid he's tumbled out of bed." She flew upstairs and found the little fellow sobbing on the floor. She petted and soothed him and settled him to sleep again, but he seemed hot and restless, and it was a long time before he would let her leave him. "Bobbie doesn't seem quite well, Hannah," she said when at last she came down. "Do you think he ought to have had a powder? A powder was one way of dispensing a certain type of medication, usually a painkiller, a mild painkiller like powdered aspirin, I think. And it was all folded up in a little paper packet. So it was referred to as taking or having a powder. He's ate too much of that cake," replied Hannah, "and I'll give him one if he isn't better tomorrow. He would have it because he saw Master Leslie having it. Between them they've ate nearly a half already. I couldn't stop him. Perhaps I oughtn't to have let them begin it, said Ruth, looking worried. Somebody ought to make the boys mind, certainly, but she felt rather overcome with the responsibility. It's not easy when you're having to put your foot down and be the adult when the others who are with you are not that much younger than you, are definitely not, who are also children. She firmly resisted the appearance of the cake for supper, but naughty Leslie, still armed with "Mother said," went into the pantry and helped himself, and poor little Ruth understood for the first time the difference between obeying a command in the spirit and in the letter. For Leslie ought to have known well enough that Mother never meant him to stuff like that. What with cake and burglars and Bobbie's feverishness, Ruth felt wide awake and fidgety when she went to bed that night. And it was a long time before she could settle herself to rest. Once she felt almost sure she heard stealthy footsteps creeping outside her door, and her heart stood still. But she pulled her bedclothes over her head and whispered, "Dear God, please don't let any burglars or anything come to hurt us, for Christ's sake." Now nobody can get in, she thought to herself, with a comfortable sense of security. When she listened again, all was still, and at last she went to sleep. It must have been quite 2 hours later, and some time after the clock had struck 12, that Ruth was suddenly awakened by a very unmistakable noise upon the landing. She sat bolt upright in bed to listen, and it seemed as if every hair on her head was doing the same. First there was a great clatter of fire irons. That's the poker and the tongs and the little shovel thing for picking up embers that have come out. A great clatter of fire irons, then a noise like the overturning of a chair, then a terrible bumping on the stairs, and a shriek of mingled fear and pain, and this in turn was well nigh drowned by more rattling of furniture and fire irons. It must be a burglar, in very deed. But what had happened? Had Leslie thrown him down the stairs, or had he thrown Leslie down? And who was that crying? And that's the end of the chapter. And no, I'm not finishing there today. I am actually going to carry on, but I am going to find a picture for you, which we shall need very shortly. Yes. When I start the next chapter, we'll get to that picture. I'm just going to put a bookmark there. And have a drink of water, because that's what I need. Sorry. I'm just going to stand up and move my legs around because they're getting a little bit uncomfortable from sitting so long. You do the same too. I'm going to leave you looking at the fake library behind me. Right, here we go. I'm back. Are you? Right. So did any of you manage to look up that story? Not the story, the song? Many Happy Returns? I don't know if it is a real one or not, but the way they talk about it, it sounds like it might be. So if nobody else has done it, I might do that if I remember. I'm not very good at remembering. Sorry. Oh, see if I can have a quick nibble of some sweet corn for my snack. We had some last night for dinner. Ooh, it's that weird green thing happening again. Eating the invisible sweet corn. Right. I keep forgetting and putting my water bottle down too fast and it makes that gluggy noise. Oh well, whatever. Doesn't matter. almost time for me to start tying my hair back with a ribbon or something. It's just too hot. Right, here we go. We shall carry on. Now, we are reading A Regular Handful by Jennie Chappell, with 2 P's and 2 L's in Chappell. And this is chapter 4, Making Amends. And it's probably going to be our last chapter today, and we will have some more next time. Making amends. Ruth's first impulse was to bury herself under the bedclothes, because there was a big noise and then finished off by somebody crying. Ruth's first impulse was to bury herself under the bedclothes and lie hidden till morning, but it sounded like Bobbie's voice sobbing. Perhaps the burglar had hurt him. Whatever the danger, she must go and see. Just as, with trembling but resolute hand, Ruth opened her door, there was a gleam of candlelight on the stairs, and Hannah flitted past. "Mussy me," Ruth heard her exclaim. "It's Bobbie. How on earth? And a chair and the fire irons too. There now, my precious, don't cry. You're not hurt, are you?" Bobbie, choked with sobs, made some reply which no one could understand. "Did he fall downstairs?" asked Ruth. "Is he hurt?" Hannah was sitting on the bottom stair of the short flight which led from the children's rooms to the first landing. She was feeling all Bobbie's bones to find if they were sound. In other words, whether he'd broken a bone or anything. Sorry, I really am having a hard time losing my place at the moment. "He's only bruised a bit and frightened," she said. A white face was silently peering over the banisters above them. And here we have the picture. A white face was peering over the banisters. Actually, I can show you just by holding it up, because this is one of the pages that's fallen out of the book. There you go. There's the white face. That would be Leslie. And there's Hannah holding on to Bobbie. And there is Ruth, checking to see if everything's okay. So why is it that there is a white face, that Leslie is peering over the banisters? We shall find out. I shall keep on reading. And I'll get that corn out of my way. Sorry. Yeah, itchy ear. Just ignore it. Pretend it's not happening. A white face was silently peering over the banisters above them. I thought it was a burglar," said Leslie in a very shaky voice. "You didn't go for Bobbie with the poker, did you?" cried Ruth in a blaze of indignation. No, I thought it was a burglar caught in my trap," answered Leslie. "After you'd all come up to bed last night, I couldn't go to sleep. I kept thinking I heard somebody downstairs. There's such a lot of queer noises, and so I thought I'd set a sort of trap so that he couldn't get right up the stairs without making such a row that he'd be frightened himself and bunk." That means to run away. "There isn't any key to my door, you know, so I couldn't lock it." "Trap indeed," quoth Hannah wrathfully, as she rocked the still sobbing Bobbie and gently rubbed his bruises. "You'll be the death of some of us one of these days with your fool's games." "What was it then?" asked Ruth. "What did you do?" "I only put a chair across the top flight of stairs about halfway down and balanced the poker and tongs on it so that they would go down bash the moment anybody touched the chair. Burglars always run if they make a noise," he added in self-defence, for Ruth was looking her contempt of the whole affair. "Tompkins told me so, because they know everybody will be roused up and they'll be caught. I can't think how Bobbie came to be out there, though. He'd no business to." "I expect he was walking in his sleep," said Ruth. "He did once before, and that was after he'd been out to tea and had pork pie for his supper. It's all because both of you have been such pigs over that cake, but you're the worst because you're old enough to know better." This was quite true, but if poor little Ruth had not been frightened and cross, she might not have said it just like that and just then. "Well, he isn't hurt, are you, old chap?" said Leslie. "You'll come on back to bed, won't you? You'll come in my bed, eh?" Like keeping each other company when someone's upset. Commonly you'd do that. No, he's coming with me, said Ruth. Come and cuddle Ruthie, won't you, ducky? But the ducky had heard Ruth a minute before calling him and Leslie pigs, and remembered how nice the cake was and what big pieces Leslie had given him. He overlooked the fact of Leslie having been the cause of his disaster, and he turned a cold shoulder upon the righteously reproachful Ruth. She could not help feeling rather inspired when, rather injured when, putting his hand in Leslie's, the little fellow stifled his lingering sobs and went back contentedly with him. In the morning, however, Bobbie was glad enough to come for mothering to Sissy Ruth, for his bruised knee was so swollen and sore that it hurt him to walk, and the bump on his forehead was large and black. Ruth washed and dressed him with the utmost tenderness and carried him downstairs. We shall have to do something to these bad places, Hannah, she said. I don't know whatever Mother would say if she were to come back and see him now. He hasn't had a bruise before all the time he's been with us. Ain't you got some of that stuff your ma thinks so much of, that rubbing oil? Said Hannah. No, there isn't a drop in the bottle. I've looked. I remember we drained the last out for Leslie's shoulder that day he got knocked down in the playground. Well, the chemist will give you something that'll do as well, I dare say. But Ruth shook her head. I wouldn't dare try anything strange with Mother away, she said. I wouldn't for worlds put anything on Bobbie's bruises but that embrocation, and nobody keeps it about here. It's specially made by Mother's own doctor at Cedars Park. If I hadn't to go to school this morning, I'd walk over myself directly after breakfast and get some. Leslie had stood by during the latter part of this conversation. It was Saturday, and a whole holiday for him. So she's got half holiday where she's goes to school on Saturday morning, but he hasn't. Yeah, school systems back then were quite different to what they are now. Half holiday and a whole holiday for him, but he had promised his chum Tompkins to go with him to a paper chase. Still, he had a kind heart, and nothing pleased him better than to help anybody out of a fix. Besides, as Bobbie's bruises were almost entirely owing to him, he ought to do what he could to make amends. All these thoughts flitted rapidly through his head, while Ruth was talking to Hannah. I'll go for that stuff if you like, he said. I can't get there and back I can get there and back in an hour if I hurry up. It says I can't, but that doesn't make sense. Ruth's troubled face brightened as if somebody had turned on a light inside. Oh, will you? She said. You're a dear. I should be so glad. But don't you want to go somewhere with Willie? That's Tompkins. That's all right, said Leslie cheerfully. If he comes for me before I'm home again, Hannah can ask him to wait. I'll tell you what, said Ruth. You can have tuppence to go by train, can't he, Hannah? You'd be sure to catch one early in the morning, and then it won't take you half the time. Now it was for Leslie to light up. He had only lately been allowed by his mother to go for short railway journeys alone, and the dignity and delight of them were great. Right you are, he cried heartily, and began to put on his boots at once. After breakfast, Bobbie, who had suggested several things to make his knee better, including sugar on his buttered toast, and going with Leslie to Cedars Park, having been established at the kitchen table with an old illustrated paper, that's a magazine with pictures in, and a pair of scissors to cut out scraps, and Leslie provided with the money and full directions for getting the embrocation, Ruth herself set out for school with a comparatively easy mind. Cedars Park was an adjacent suburb where they often went to an old friend of Mrs. Morell's. Sorry, there's a tiny bit of the corner of the page missing. Makes it weird to read. And Leslie knew the way to Dr. Mason's quite well, either on foot or by train. The doctor was sure to be at home thus early, and Hannah would be able to apply the liniment to Bobbie's bruises without delay. As for Leslie, he set out whistling his loudest. And if you're not sure what an embrocation is, it sounds like it's a liniment. And if you're not sure with either of those, you can look them up and write the definition in the chat. As for Leslie, he set out whistling his loudest. He felt, though he didn't exactly put the feelings into words, that he was being very properly rewarded for his self-sacrifice. He had virtuously proposed to deny himself so far as to take on a lot of fag, that's work, for the sake of Ruth and Bobbie, and it had turned into a delightful little railway trip instead. Never mind the fact that the whole reason it needed to be done was his his booby trap for any burglars. As he neared Grindham's, the general stores, he saw a small crowd collected around the window. He soon wriggled his way to a front place and found that the attraction was an advertisement of a new material for puddings. It was the working model of a very fat and jolly-looking boy eating the patent pudding out of an immense dish, with a spoon nearly as big as a frying pan. As the boy's arm lifted the spoon, his mouth opened wide and closed again when the spoon went back to the dish. One of those mechanical things. So the mechanical boy sitting there going like this. And it was done for advertising purposes. But this was not all. A cat sitting by the boy's side also jumped up in apparent eagerness for her share every time the arm and spoon moved. Altogether, it was a fascinating performance. Leslie stood with the rest, riveted to the spot, and quite forgetful of how the time was passing, because that sort of mechanical toy thing display was not common. Later on, that style of mechanization was used to create toys that would move for themselves, little wind-up cars and robots and things like that. But at this stage, not as a toy, too expensive for that, used for advertising. When at length he tore himself from this exhibition and raced for the station, it was only to be told, on arriving there, that the train he wanted had just gone, and that there would not be another for nearly 3/4 of an hour. He felt very crestfallen, for this meant that he must either buck up and walk all the way, or run a risk of being too late for Tompkins and the paper chase. However, there was still a chance that he might get a train to bring him back, so that would still make up some of the time. He started off at his best pace, resolving that nothing more must be allowed to delay him for a moment. But he had not gone far before he came upon a most gorgeous motor car. Anyone having flashbacks to Toad of Toad Hall and his motor car? Boop, boop. Came upon a most gorgeous motor car standing outside the Temperance Hotel in High Street. No one was in it or near it, but at the door of the hotel stood 2 gentlemen, and he heard one of them ask the way to Alexandra Avenue, Cedars Park. It was in Alexandra Avenue that Dr. Mason lived. Leslie was just going to run forward and offer the desired information when it was apparently supplied by a man inside, for one of the gentlemen said, "Well, then we'll just have a glass of soda and milk and get on." And then they both disappeared into the hotel. At that moment, an idea popped into Leslie's head that made it fairly swim with excitement. There was the motor, a big roomy thing with a broad back seat and nobody to occupy it but those 2 gentlemen. It was going to the very place Leslie wanted to reach. How easy to slip in and hide under the seat and slip out unobserved when it stopped at Cedars Park. What fun it would be, and what a tale to tell at school. Leslie throbbed and thrilled in every inch of his venturesome little body at the thought. He was so excited. And after all, he argued with himself, where would be the harm? And not a soul was looking. The next minute Leslie was crouching, trembling with excitement, underneath the back seat of the vehicle. Almost directly, the gentlemen returned and took their places. There was a mighty whizzing and whirring and shuddering and straining, making Leslie feel like a mouse in the works of a great clock that was just going to strike. There was a rattle, a bang, a toot-toot, and the stowaway felt himself being whirled along at almost railroad speed in the direction, as he supposed, of Cedars Park. And guess what? That's the end of the chapter, and you'll have to come along next time to hear the rest. Or the next bit, anyway. Oh, goodness me. Better Than His Dessert is the heading of the next chapter title. What's going to happen, considering the fact that the book is called A Regular Handful? Is there a way that this can go wrong? There's been a slight hint at it. When it ended the chapter, the book ended the chapter with, in the direction, as he supposed, of Cedars Park. So quite possibly things aren't going to go quite the way he planned. Anyway, so I'll see you next time. I do hope you can have some rest and relaxation, and some fun reading some other things as well, if that's your thing, or playing games, or something pleasant happening for you in your days between now and then. Okay, bye.